Good morning. And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. My name is Phyllis O'Neill. I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm your worship associate this morning. Today, I'm excited to say that we mark the 10th anniversary of the dedication of this church building. Our third home in our 114th year history as Unitarian Universalist congregation in Lane County. This morning's worship service will be a bit shorter than usual so that we can share stories about how this place came to be. If today is your first day with us and you'd like to know more about Unitarian Universalism, faith, or this church in particular, our minister, Rev. Jen, will be standing at the welcome table in the south hallway. She'll be happy to greet you and answer any questions you might have. If you're online, the link to our visitor form is being dropped into the chat now. Please remember that we have hearing assistance devices, braille hymnals, and low stimulation room situated in the chapel directly behind the space here, where you can watch the service in a smaller, quieter surrounding. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we're glad you're here. Now let's take a few moments to greet your neighbors, especially those you haven't met yet.
Good Sunday morning, everyone. I'm the Rev. Jen Youngsun, and I'm the minister lucky enough to serve this wonderful congregation. I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm glad to see all of you today. Love has called some of you home after many, many years of being away, and so I welcome you, especially if you have not been to UUCE in a while. This will always be your home. So I've been going through the church archives in the last several weeks, sneezing my way through ancient papers back in the vault. Yes, this church has a vault. And while I've been doing that, I've been thinking about how it is that you and they turn into us and we. Each one of us entered this congregation at a particular time in its history. I think it is Betty Rutherford over there, who is our longest serving congregant, right? You're still climbing. And Betty, I believe, has worshiped in all three of the church buildings, right? Yes. 11th and Ferry, yep. When you were 10 years old, yeah. So do you remember the year that you entered? Mm-hmm. All right, wonderful, wonderful. When Joyce Salisbury was here about 60 years, I think Betty's got her beat. Still holds the record over here. So when I first arrived, I intentionally started to say we when I spoke to you all, although sometimes it felt a little weird because I had just arrived, and I kept practicing saying we the church, rather than y'all. And it reminds me of the last stanza in the Marge Piercy poem, The Low Road, where she says, "It starts when you say we, and you know who you mean, and each day you mean one more." Now, many of us were not here in the 2010s, but when we tell our history, we get to say that we moved from 40th and Donald, and we were moved by a very powerful mission to serve the people in this neighborhood. In a few weeks, we're going to welcome the latest group of new UUCE members. Each person who enters this community of faith becomes a part of its history and heritage and has every right to claim we. And that takes nothing away from the people who were actually here in this space during those times. Up on the scissor lift, way up on the roof, on the floor, under the floor. You know, ever since I heard these wonderful stories coming out about how this congregation accomplished this enormous task of turning a rather drab, plain building into a home big enough for their vision, I have wanted this celebration. It's an act of gratitude. It's a sacrament of remembrance. It is a rite of passage. Now, while the material world urges us to rush headlong into the next shiny thing, spiritual communities ask us to stop and to remember. For example, yesterday was the end of Shavuot. It's the Jewish Sabbath commemorating the receiving of the books of the Torah, just over 3,000 years ago. Spiritual communities do this, right? We pause to reflect on the past so that we can carry the heritage of mind and heart to the next generations. Therefore, we do not neglect the ceremonies of our passage. Come, let us celebrate the vision and the vitality that enabled the people to build a home, the vision and vitality that will take us into the next decade. Come, let us worship together. During this time of prayer and meditation, I invite you to take a prayerful pose, whatever that might be for you. Just allow yourselves to relax and be comfortable here, for this is a place that you can call home, and this is a place where you belong. The fullness of you is accepted here and belongs here. Let's weave together a prayer, together with community voices. Let's call out the names, the many names that we use to describe the holy. O Spirit of life, O universal force.
Radiant infinite is.
O radiant infinite it is. Adonai. That which is larger than I. Thou art with us. Thou art with us. Gaia, we thank you today for our many, many gifts. We thank you for we thank you for the life field. We thank you for family. We thank you for trees. For beautiful flowers, for this community. We thank you, Gaia. We thank you.
Our inner biology in tubes.
Say that again. That was...
The operation of our inner biology and all the tubes that make bodies work.
The inner biology and the tubes that make our bodies work. I love that. I am also grateful for that. Thank you, Lord, for gravity and levity. So many things that we are grateful for in this life. And at the same time that we hold our deep gratitude and our deep thanks, we also lift up our broken hearts. And we're worried for ourselves, we're worried for others. Today we hold in prayer. You can just call out a name or you can say it softly to yourself. We call out the names of those that we are holding in prayer today. And as today is the eve of Memorial Day, we also make some space to lift up our loved ones and our ancestors who served in the military and who have passed away. I'll include my father-in-law, Clyde King. You can name others that you want to remember today if you want to. Thank you.
Daniel. Carl Williams.
We close our time of prayer with an affirmation, with a promise to life, to live up to all of these wonderful gifts, to set high aspirations for ourselves, to live into our largest possible life. And we know that we can't do that by ourselves. And so we ask for support from this community and from our friends and from our families. Ever grateful for this life. And the people said, Amen.
So after many years of searching and planning, the members of UUCE voted to buy this building on November 1st, 2009. It had previously been home to the Scottish Rite Masons. At that time, the interior of the building looked dark, chopped up, and dated. The drop acoustical ceiling hid these beautiful beams that you can see today. The floor was covered with old, dirty, dark carpet, and there was large permanent stage with oak floor where our podium now stands. Initially, it was a little hard to imagine what it might become, but we had vision and we were committed to make it happen. An architect was hired, plans were developed. Our congregation was committed to the task at hand. One of our members, Ed Zach, brought his construction experience to the team and agreed to serve as volunteer coordinator during the renovation. It was a Herculean task to manage all those volunteers who wanted to be a part of the project. Judy Hansen started a blog reporting daily on what was accomplished that day. During the demolition phase, the dated seating was removed and sold. The acoustic tile that was removed was given to a local theater company for reuse. The stage, drop ceiling, and carpeting were removed, and we began to see the possibilities. The building became known as the BUB, standing for Beautiful UU Building.
Yeah, right.
The next phase was to rebuild. There was insulation to install, beams to be sanded. offices to be framed, doors to be installed. A total of 270 volunteers, ranging in age from 9 to 90, donated more than 55,000 hours of time. Some people worked at the site every day. Damn, we were good. Some people worked at the site every day. Others came as often as they could. People who had never experienced this kind of work joined in, removing studs, pulling nails, stripping copper wire, disassembling bathroom stalls, and dismantling old heating systems. I didn't know this would feel so emotional. Volunteers with more construction experience laid out office space, framed, pulled wires for speakers and internet, installed ceiling lights, and tiled restrooms. The white ceiling panels that you see up here, we call them clouds, were fabricated and installed by volunteers. Baseboard coving, painting, and quite a bit of the finish work were volunteer projects. Mama's Kitchen offered hot lunch every day, 7 days a week for the first year. That was a volunteer group of people from this congregation. And every work day for the next year, plus snacks. Another group of people took turns to show up every afternoon to wash dishes and clean the kitchen. The concrete floors were sanded 7 times by a revolving team of volunteers in order to remove all the glue and get down to the floors that you see today. Bob and Margaret Kaser used a concrete saw to cut tracks for the hearing coil loop that we have. Licensed contractors were hired to focus on systems requiring more expertise and licensure to upgrade electrical, plumbing, heating, and air systems. The metal removed from the building was sold to Schnitzer Steel, and as much lumber as possible was reused. Any remaining lumber was made available to people looking for scrap or kindling. Anything that could be recycled was. In fact, we were one of a handful of local organizations that won the Trash Busters Award from Lane County for repurposing, reusing, and recycling materials that would have otherwise been thrown into the landfill. We now have a beautiful building with many state-of-the-art green features. Tina Turner asked, "What's love got to do with it?" I'd say a lot. Our first service in this building was held on May 27th, 2012. We were still under construction and still had scaffolding along that wall. Someone hung prayer flags on them to dress them up just a little. The work continued on until interior finishes were put in place and the playground was laid out and fenced. The following year, May 19th, 2013, we officially dedicated this church with a special ceremony and worship service. This building is a beautiful example of beloved community working together to build our home.
In a few minutes, after we finish up here, we're going to invite you to go to one of the storytelling stations that we got set up today. There's a silent one in the chapel. There's going to be one here in the sanctuary, so you can stay in the sanctuary. We've got a portal TV set up in the east foyer, which is right here. We've got a portal set up in the south foyer over there, all showing photos. So if you were part of the renovation, could you just make sure to plant yourself at one of these storytelling stations so that as the photos come up, you can share your memories, and let's share those stories with each other. For the people on Zoom, hello Zoom friends, Suzanne, our pianist, is going to be actually narrating some slides just for you. So the Zoom people get a very special presentation with Suzanne today. So we haven't forgotten about anyone. The stories that we tell about the past, of course, shape our present lives, and they help to build the dreams for our future. So many stories have come out, and I hope that you'll hear a bunch of them today. At some point during the renovation, I heard that the UUCE pagans got together, and they assembled at the church with rattles and chimes and bells and incense and a cauldron full of salt water that they had collected. That water had been collected from their homes. They each brought a little from their homes, and then they added salt, and then they all placed their hands into the water, charging it with their wishes and their hopes and intention, their power and their energy. They used that salt water to cleanse the inside and the outside of this building, casting out all that was harmful and taking in all that was good and healing. So much good came from the collective work of transforming the old Scottish Rite Temple into a light-filled Unitarian Universalist church. This was a time of intense creative collaboration, and lifelong friendships and bonds were made at this time. It was also a time of disagreement and conflict and hurt. Many have since found a path to healing, and some found different paths. These last 10 years have been a time of incredible accomplishment. This is a really special and strong and capable congregation. As one of you said, we didn't just tough it out, we learned how to really love each other through this process. Did you know that since the building dedication 10 years ago, 182 people have signed the membership book? Yeah. And we started out with a mortgage of $1.4 million. You know what that balance is now today? It's just over $300,000. We're going to have a really big mortgage burning party very soon, I think. Given how much labor and love went into this building and just how gorgeous it is and how great it feels to be inside of it, I totally understand why people would feel kind of protective about it. But owning and maintaining a beautiful home was never the end goal. The reason for moving in the first place was that we wanted to be a part of the larger community, working towards social change, justice, and equity. The building was just a means toward that vision and an expression of the UU gospel, that gospel message that says every single person is inherently worthy. Every single person is imbued with dignity, and that all living things are connected in an inescapable web, and also that together and only together can we create a better world for ourselves and for our children. We wanted to change the way we understood our purpose in the world. And so we changed our mission statement from one that was inward focused to from one that was just building a community for ourselves to a mission statement and a purpose that talked about serving the needs of the world from a place of love and from a place of a transformed self. When an institution commits to this kind of cultural change, it's like turning a really big ship. It takes a long time, and we're still in the process of turning. Kat, do we have the covenant slide? During this past year, a small group of people gathered to consider the language of our covenant of right relations. And we looked at it and said, you know, it's very inward looking. We need one that's more outward focused. And also, given the fact that we're forming a new committee on right relations, we can fold all of that old language into those policies. And we went on to write a brand new covenant. Now, on the day of our annual meeting, June 11th, we're going to hand out copies of this new covenant for you, but this is just a sneak peek. As a beloved community empowered by love, we covenant to embrace the next person who is always arriving, open to the change they will bring. We covenant to trust others in their identity and truth and work to be trustworthy. We covenant to speak our truth bravely and gently as we commune in love and peace. We covenant to make efforts to understand the views of others and make amends when intentions and impact collide. We covenant to expand our connections with the larger community with humility and empathy. We covenant to remember that how we are with each other is the foundation upon which we build the beloved community. Now that you and I are entering our third year in shared ministry, and we've got some good structures and systems in place, we can now turn our attention to strengthening our relationships beyond the walls of this building. I am so excited for this new church year coming up. Now, I know that we have some challenging budget issues to deal with, but this is an opportunity for us to do something bold and courageous together rather than shrink back in fear. With that in mind, we are putting together a time capsule today. In that time capsule that we won't open for another 10 years, in 2033, I'm going to ask you to write your vision of what this spiritual community is going to look like in 2023, what it's going to sound like, what we will be doing. Just write your vision of that, and we'll stuff it in a jar, and then we'll ask the buildings and grounds crew to bury it somewhere on our grounds. The decade of the 20s. We're in it, right? What shall we make of it together? Now let's extinguish our chalice with our closing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace, go in love, everyone, and go to the listening stations.